I was browsing through your videos and saw you did a video on lake and sea creatures. After listening to it, I thought you might like to hear the story of a man that I used to be close friends with. I used to be close friends with a guy who managed a small team of recreational divers that would often go out on lakes and practice doing deep diving, compression stopping, and other things. Lake water is vastly different than the ocean, which is why this was more aimed at beginners looking to get their feet wet, literally, into diving, and the basics. The man's name, who I will mention, was named Earl. Earl had done many sea diving expeditions, but eventually transitioned to freshwater diving as he got older. I was good friends with the man. Very good friends, actually. Unfortunately, he decided to take his own life last year in March of 2019. I thought it would be good to share with what he shared with me. On one of his last, if not his last freshwater diving expedition, he and a couple of students went freshwater diving in one of the Great Lakes. I can't remember which one. Forgive me. I think it was Superior, but I can't quite remember. He claims to have been attacked violently by what he described as a part marine crocodile, part creature of the Black Lagoon. This man was not a fearmonger by any means and was a very honest person. He did not show fear of the water, and safety was his #1 mantra before diving. He knew the cons and knew the risks. This had scared him so bad that he quit his diving expeditions altogether entirely. Because we were so close, he was one of the few people he had talked about what he had seen that day, saying they were exploring part of the bottom, using specialized metal detectors for treasure hunting when this thing came out of a pocket at the bottom and nearly ripped his leg right off his body. Had he not moved just in time, it would have. It followed him closely to the surface as he retreated in fear, grabbing onto him and trying to drown him. It gashed at his back several times just trying to grab onto him and pull him down. Upon getting back up on the boat, he required severe medical attention immediately. His wounds were not life-threatening, but did require stitches from bleeding out and possible infection. I wasn't made aware of this until probably 4 months after the incident happened in the summer. He told me briefly what I just told you above, and that was that. I didn't want to push for more details than necessary, because he seemed so shook about the experience that he had. That's when he told me he was done diving altogether, and he could have really endangered the lives of his students and friends. I didn't hear from him much after that, only through text now and then, but it was still minimal, not like it used to be. The years prior, we would go out and do stuff together, like hiking, eating at good restaurants. Looking back at it, he actually never took me diving, to which I'm surprised it didn't happen. Everything happens for a reason, I guess. Then 2019 hit. I would reach out to him but not hear anything from him. And then March comes. I got a phone call from his girlfriend at the time, who called me and let me know that he hung himself the night previous. He had developed a strong drinking problem in the months prior to his death. I don't know if what happened to him on the last diving adventure had anything to do with him drinking and ending his life. I would like to think there's no connection. He never once talked about depression, and always seemed like a lively and active busy man. He would have been the perfect definition of not having enough time to be depressed. Tragedy aside, I felt it would be best if you knew his final diving account. When I was 7 years old and camping at a lake with my family, I was swimming alone in the water when I saw what I believe was a lake monster. It was so large that it was easily 3 times bigger than I. It had a massive head, dark red skin, and huge long fins at its side. It had teeth that were long and pointed, as sharp as knives. I screamed like a little girl. It slowly inched closer and closer to me. I yelled to my family, and I swam for my life. I couldn't believe it. I was so frightened that I swam as fast as I could back to my mother and father at shore. My parents were screaming at me, knowing I was in danger. My dad, bless his heart, in his full non-swimming clothes, jumped in head first and swam towards me to rescue me. He gets me and pulls me out of the water. I'm hyperventilating, and I'm trying to explain what I just saw. I was worried that being 7 years old, they wouldn't take what I had to say very seriously. Well, they did to an extent. My mother tried to explain it by saying I just saw a big fish, but I told her this one was going to eat me. Looking back, it kind of reminded me of some sort of crocodile, maybe a freshwater crocodile, but I ain't ever seen a crocodile that looked anything like this did. This occurred at Lewisville Lake in Texas. You know what they say, everything is bigger in Texas, even the lake monsters and carnivorous fish. I got the chance, about 10 years ago, to go deep-sea diving off the coast of Mexico, where I firmly believe I saw what looked to be a plesiosaur. We were diving out, and probably around 20 miles off the coast, with me in the water, and my other 3 diving partners getting ready for their descent. I had ventured probably no more than 50 yards away from the boat, and, of course me being me, was the first one in the water. I could see out clearly in the water. The open ocean, there was this large shape coming in my direction. My 3 other diving partners were still on the boat, I think taking their time getting out to the water. I continued to watch this large shape, in awe, figuring it was a very large fish, possibly a sunfish. Well, I was partially right, as it got closer and began turning east to change directions. What I believe to change direction with the current, actually. That's when I got a pretty good look at the shape of it. It looked exactly like that of a plesiosaurus, a rather long neck with 4 smaller fins. It's like I was living in Jurassic Park. The thing about plesiosaur is they are a very distinctive shape. There is no mistaking or misidentifying them. That silhouette, that shape will always be with me. I was amazed at what I was seeing and couldn't believe that I was the only one seeing this amazing sight. I felt for my diving partners who still remained upon the boat. The whole entire sighting lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt much longer. Once it disappeared from view, I quickly swam back to the boat, yelling about what I had just seen, in total amazement. I thought it was incredible, breathtaking, an experience to be had. I boasted about how I just got to witness something that we all thought to be extinct. A couple of my friends believed me, but one of them just thought I was a loon and making it up. I know what I saw. There is no mistaking such a shape like that off in the water. The distance of this animal was far away, but not so far that I couldn't make out or distinguish what it was. It's like if a great white shark were to swim towards you and then turn into the current. From a good distance, a shark is distinctively a shark. There's no misidentifying it. They have a very unique shape and size. You don't have to be 20 feet away to get an estimate on the size and type of animal of those. The same applied to this scenario. Its neck and tail were very long, and it had a smaller head than what I envisioned, but maybe if I was closer, I could see more of the intricacies. From my distance, it looked to be a green, blue, gray color. The discovery of such a large beast from 40 million years ago makes for even more interesting discoveries that'll lead to more understanding of our prehistoric past. And because so much of the world's diversity, especially in the deep sea, can be found in the ocean floor, the discovery of so many ancient organisms will only fuel the quest for understanding this crucial step of cycle on our planet. This alone is the reason I strive for deep dives and to be pushing for more exploration. Good day. I was doing some scuba diving with some friends off the southern coast of Maui. The waters are beautiful, just as much as the fish life. But somewhere along the journey, I got spooked when I saw this strange, dangly-looking creature swimming out of a small alcove underneath the water. It looked like a cross between an octopus and a squid, and it had these weird arms that were long enough to wrap around its body and then extend all the way down its tail end. It radiated purple to red and had these long tendrils that drug behind it. No, Not like tentacles, but almost like stingers. Kind of like a jellyfish. That's what they looked like. This creature was very large, longer than me, and I'm 6 foot. The thing swam towards us, and all of us watched in awe as it slowly approached. Then, it seemed to lunge forward at us. My friend quickly started swimming out the other way, and we all began swimming back towards the boat. We have never seen this animal before, so we weren't sure what to expect. It pursued us in the water, the whole 80 feet back to our anchored boat. I knew we were only a mile or so offshore, but I swear it swam faster and faster, closing in on us. We were able to get back on the boat and sped off. It never reappeared. We never saw the creature again after that. But we did come back in that exact spot for 2 more days after for more scuba diving, before continuing on our journey to another section of ocean. Whatever that thing was, it was certainly a new creature we had seen. Make no mistake. During our 2nd and 3rd days there, at the part of the coast, we never saw this creature again. I have no idea what it was, and the thing just looked very bizarre. I'm convinced it had followed us back to the boat the first time, and then hid. It was no animal we knew of. I almost wonder if that thing was just trying to chase us off, or maybe it was actually trying to kill us. I've never been back to that part of the underwater reef, which was south of our boat that day. My mind still races with possibilities of what it could have been, and what it was doing there. The next 2 days we were scuba diving there. We actually spent more of our time exploring the northern, western, and eastern regions, even seeing sea turtles. No sharks, thankfully. Because of what we do, we happen to know some experts in our social circles. When asked about what we had seen, they weren't quite sure what we were talking about. These are experienced guys who study marine life. They know just about every fish, every whale, everything. We all saw the same thing, and to the best of their understanding, what we saw isn't a normal animal that lives in this area. My best guess is that it could have been a large creature that was passing through, but ultimately, I don't know. I've never seen a creature like that before. It looked so very alien-like, as much as the life does in the sea. After some thinking, the 4 of us agreed that it was most likely a large cephalopod of some kind. This was quite possibly a large and very aggressive one, but still not something you would ever want to encounter again. We had gotten lucky. I still remember looking into the alcove and seeing that thing come out of its hole, with its tentacles all around it. All in all, it was an interesting experience, but I'll say this. If that creature's tentacles would have grabbed at us, we would have needed a lot more luck than what we actually had. Years ago, during tuna fishing season, far off, about 65 miles in the ocean from Massachusetts, we all had a nearly terrifying experience out there. This was later on in the season, around October, but something very large nearly capsized our fishing boat. Something much larger than any whale. I don't know what it was exactly that scared us so much, but it slightly surfaced multiple times afterwards. It appeared to have a very elongated body that we made out to be a large sea serpent-esque animal, maybe an eel. The thing came from underneath the boat, and to my best guess, it accidentally hit our boat while ascending to the surface, which was so powerful, nearly capsized us. The ocean is an unknown place after all. We were all pretty shaken up by this event, but luckily none of us got seriously hurt. And there's no telling the true size of any animals that live down there in the deep. When you're roughly 65 miles offshore, anything is possible in terms of sea life. You'll run into all sorts of things you never thought possible. So when I say part of this unknown creature surfaced, it was really only parts of its body, which we all made out to be kind of like a long eel body. I'm not lying when I say that this thing was larger and longer than a whale. Once it hit our boat and nearly knocked us over, it continued nonchalantly swimming east, unfazed by the impact. When you have a sea creature that large, I have no idea how it accidentally hit our boat. Maybe it wasn't accidental. That's just myself trying to convince me it wasn't a nefarious event. I think with how big that thing was, if it wanted to capsize us and devour us whole, it could have, in traditional sea monster fashion. Unsurprisingly, for me, maybe not for you. Since I work around hardened and experienced fishermen for many years, they all have their own terrifying sea monster type stories that they've shared with me over the years. This was just my real first experience with a larger than life sea creature. I think it actually set the tone for my life to this day, and everything I've done in some way has been trying to keep a grasp on reality and sanity against all odds. I've had other close calls and stories, but those I'll keep for another time and place. I think the important part is what happened in the ocean and how it's relatable to discovering new species of creatures in the ocean. There is so much unknown life that exists that we have no idea about. Since we're the ones spending so much time out in this terrain, we get the joy of running into these things. It's a risk all of us face every single day out there, and it's an exciting and terrifying experience at the same time. Every new discovery starts off as a mystery. When we bring these new life forms back to the surface of enlightenment and learn more about them, it's a whole new adventure all over again. Like I said, this long eel-like creature was much longer than a whale, maybe double or triple in length, and you would think with all of us on board nearly being capsized that we would be fazed by the event. Surprisingly, none of us long-term were, because so many of the men that I fished with were so hardened from their own sea adventures. Well, this was just another day on the job, business as usual. Since it was my first real quote-unquote sea monster experience, I was convinced it was Leviathan himself, but maybe not. I can safely walk away from this event though, and tell you it was the largest sea creature that I've ever known or seen in my entire life. I mean, this thing had to have been over 70 feet in length, and probably double the width of a whale. I'm not kidding either. You need to understand that for something to nearly capsize a fishing boat, it's a pretty big deal. One of my close friends who I fished along with, he's an older guy, but during his tenure as a fisherman, he's seen some really large alligator-like animals out in the ocean. He calls them aquadiles, or aquatic crocodiles. He goes on to tell me that they are the largest unspoken sea predators he has ever seen. His theory is that there is a subspecies of aquatic crocodiles nearly 60 to 70 feet in length that just never died out from extinction and are still around from the dinosaur days. This would explain his own sightings that he's had around Australia and other areas of the world. I guess seeing these large type of aquatic crocodilians are very common around the New Zealand-Australian area. Why? I'm not exactly sure, but I've never myself gone tuna fishing around there, or really any fishing for that matter. But either way, if that's what I have to deal with seeing, you can count me out. Back in 2011, I got the chance as a university student to attend a small deep-sea expedition in the Gulf Coast of Mexico during May of the same year. The trip was more or less about testing out the current boundaries of deep-sea expeditions and the current technology available to us at the time than it really was anything else. Because of my performance in school and interest in marine biology at the time, and because I knew the right people, I got to be selected to take part. I had no idea what to expect, but I figured I would just go along with the group for the sake of going on an adventure. The trip itself went well enough. We were able to explore the deepest parts of the ocean floor without any problems. However, there was one encounter that I will never forget. It happened when we were exploring a large underwater basin known as the Sigsbee Deep. It's a small portion in the central part of the Gulf Coast that is around 14,000 feet deep. Man has explored much deeper, but again, this point of an expedition was to test how newer technology could sustain significant water pressure. The entire expedition was made up of 3 boats, each equipped with different equipment and various scientific instruments. We had several marine biologists aboard, as well as a few other crew members with technical skills such as various technicians. When exploring the region, you're not allowed to take anything with you that could be possibly left behind, be it supplies or equipment. This is for 2 reasons. The first being that if something were to happen to your boat, and you had supplies aboard, you would have no way to provide for your crew. The second being that everything you bring with you must be able to withstand that high of pressure. That's not to say that we didn't find anything of value. While exploring and descending, we did find a large number of species that had not yet been seen before by any other expeditions in the area. We also managed to collect several new species of jellyfish, new types of crab, and an abundance of other marine life. That was a joy. Once we really started descending into the basin is when we got the radio call from one of the ships above, saying we needed to ascend back up to the surface immediately. Something very large was ascending from the bottom of the basin, a bio-life form, and was on the course to collide with us at a nearly 90-degree angle. We all scrambled to get ready and prepared our gear while we waited for the signal that would tell us what to do next. At this point, I don't think anyone had ever encountered anything like this before. There was no warnings given to us or any indications that we should prepare ourselves for this type of event. All we knew was that this thing was coming towards us fast, and we needed to get out of the area as soon as possible. We were able to successfully ascend back up our ship to the surface without any issues, thank God. We were then shown what our machinery picked up and what exactly they had seen. Judging from the data, roughly 2,000 feet below our ship at the time, something of incredible size and mass was ascending quickly upwards from the bottom of the basin, which again, for those of you that are listening, is 14,000 feet deep. So large that the force of whatever it was coming up through the water could have had a devastating impact on our tiny submarine. We were able to quickly move off course and then ascend from there without any problems. But had we continued to stay on our course and continued descending, we would have smacked right into, well, whatever it was. The only thing we could make out was that it was indeed some sort of bio-life form that we lost track of once it ascended to a certain point, because it turned as it reached out of the basin, but continued to stay along the bottom floor of the Gulf Coast. At the time, our surface home-based boat was using proprietary patent-pending technology, along with sonar technology, if you're curious as to how we were able to see what this was and how it was approaching. During this time, we could get a glimpse, a small glimpse, to that of larger-than-life life forms living down in certain depths into the basin. This life form just happened to be ascending from the bottom and came into range of reading. The machine estimates are very rough because it was still being worked on at the time, but I heard potentially this life form was anywhere around 37.2 meters to 48 meters in length, judging by what they had captured on their equipment. That means whatever this was literally enormous. That's a colossal-sized underwater animal, but for something to live in such depths like the basin would have to be of incredible size to withstand such water pressure anyway. Now that we're in 2020, technology has been perfected and more advanced than it was 9 years ago. I'm sorry my story isn't that exciting, but it left all of us freaked out and excited at the same time. The basin extends pretty deep, so something was making its home all the way down in there. What was it exactly? Well, even we can't be too sure. I've been wanting to tell my story for some time, but I have held back because it's so crazy. I've had to convince myself that I'm not crazy, and I was not hallucinating. Let me give you some backstory before I get into the nitty-gritty. This was in May of 2015. I was with my ex-girlfriend at the time, and we were driving down the coast of Washington, Oregon, and down into California, all along Highway 101, which travels down the coastline of these 3 states. One of our favorite things to do is to go out onto the beach at nighttime. We have done this more than once, had no problems ever, with bums, police, anything. Nobody ever gives us problems. There's just something so enticing about the moonlight shining out over the vast empty ocean with nobody around and the tide continuously rising. It's a beautiful experience. At the time, I believe we were in Southern Oregon. I can't tell you what beach or by what town because I don't know. We just pulled off to a spot. In a spontaneous moment, We just pulled off the side of the road to a spot that had beach access, grabbed our blanket and our hoodies, and ran off into the beach to watch the tide come in. Luckily for us, there was still plenty of space for us to sit and watch the night sky. Even better, it was a clear night with a bright moon illuminating the night sky, paving this out-of-this-world landscape. My favorite thing about night adventures on the beach is that there's nobody else around, so that was truly something. We get set up with our blanket and we sit down to start cuddling and talking about how beautiful the beach is. It's windy as can be, which is why we wore our hoodies. I don't think there's a beach in the world that isn't windy. We were just watching the waves crash onto the shore, making small conversation. Maybe 10 minutes go by, and my girlfriend is like, "Hey, let's build a fire and roast some marshmallows." We had some kindling and firewood in the back of the car that we kept for such occasions. She wanted me to go run and get it. It didn't take much convincing. I was agreeing. After a quick kiss, I started to get up when both of our attention just happened to be pulled out in the distance, where we saw this shape climb out of the sand. It happened so fluidly and quickly. To make it easier to understand, this is exactly what my girlfriend, whom I talked to later about it, and verified we saw the same thing. A person, a pitch black figure, climbed their way out of the sand and run towards the water, reached the water, and continued running into the water, not even fazed by the oncoming waves, until they were fully submerged underneath the waves and never came back out. I hadn't even stepped off the blanket yet when my girlfriend and I in unison rush up, grab our blanket, and head back to the car in total fear. We get the car started and we got out of there, flying down the highway. We didn't say a word for probably a half an hour, maybe longer. I was the one to break the silence with asking her what she saw, where she calmly explained to me, I don't know how, but she did, what I had just typed to you. I knew as soon as she told me that I wasn't hallucinating. We were not under any substance, alcohol, weed, nothing. 100% sober, not sleep deprived, no pills, nothing. This was maybe 50 feet away from us. This figure, which was totally pitch black, ran out onto the sea, continued going until fully submerged. What? Why? Even in the dim lighting that the moon provided, had it been a person, we would have seen colors of clothing, or some sort of shape. But this, it was just a silhouette of a person. There was no defining extra shapes like clothes on them or anything. It was super creepy. Then for this figure or person to run not only into the water, but into it until fully underneath by the waves. We were seriously mind-screwed. We debated and talked about it for hours afterwards, speculating what it could have been. I think my girlfriend at the time concluded that we saw a ghost of a sailor who had died and was running back to sea. I don't believe in that. Besides, why would a ghost interact with our world like that? Literally digging their way out of sand like it did in full view of us and running into the water. It wasn't some transparent apparition either. That's my super creepy night experience at the beach. Make of it what you will, but I promise I'm not crazy. We both saw this, and we can both testify to this day that this is truth. It all started for me when I was a young boy, as I remember watching an educational program about animals living in caves on TV. The idea got me thinking about how many life forms that we see on this earth, and when I got older and started going on deep diving missions and saw a living plesiosaur, my heart fell to fear. I've been doing several deep-sea dives with various hobbyists, friends, and likes, including scuba diving and deep-sea fishing. In the depths of the ocean, deep water often causes a change in the food chains that may have the effect of changing the distribution of species and possibly even causing them to go extinct. It's amazing how such incredible creatures can live in this very harsh environment, yet remain seemingly unchanged. My friends and I have only just begun to learn more about the life on the deep and the many ways we can protect them from these dangerous predators. One of my friends is passionate about conservation and has been working with scientists worldwide to better understand life in the deep sea and I'm glad the opportunity to work together made the most sense for me. What type of animal lived on the ocean floor around 500 million years ago? I can assure you that I have some interesting things to say about that, but I'll save that. It's easy to think that the life forms living on Earth today would have been extinct long before the dinosaurs. However, some of the most complex and important structures we see are formed when we find animals at the bottom of the sea. It takes thousands of years or longer for them to die. This is why I believe we saw the plesiosaur. Living at such depths and so many places to hide that the ocean offers, it would be very easy for elusive species of animals to hide and mask themselves to not be known to mankind. This is why we choose to only deep dive in certain areas, times, and depths, for protection against the unknown. Yes, we did indeed see what we truthfully believe to be a living dinosaur in the flesh close up. Even though plesiosaur are carnivorous and eat fish, it showed no signs of aggression towards us in the deep water and simply ignored us as it swam by, unfazed by our bright lights to see. It wasn't much bigger than a smaller elephant, which, when it belongs to a creature like this, is still shocking. I always imagined aquatic dinosaurs being so much larger, but it might have been a young one. We are currently advocating for bigger budgets to do even deeper diving missions, to explore regions and parts left to the ocean. We want to unveil to the world the undiscovered to mankind. Sorry for the long email. You'll hear from me again if we truly do capture great evidence. About 2 years ago, I went with a friend. Let's call him John. On his boat out to sea for a little vacation with him and his wife. Our plan was to sail up and down the west coast for weeks at a time. He's a lover of the ocean and understands that there is more to the sea than we can comprehend. He's seen an abundant amount of life out there. Seals, sharks, octopus, all sorts of sea life. He's gone deep diving, but has also cage dived with sharks. The man is fearless and a relentless sailor. His respect and love for the sea comes from his father, who took him out to sea all the time as a younger boy. Me? Not so much. I used this vacation as an opportunity to get away from my life troubles for a while, since at the time, I was at rock bottom and was going through a really rough patch in my life with addiction and bad people. Moving forward, we're out on the coast, probably no more than 10 miles out at sea, when something extremely large goes underneath the boat. I don't know anything about sea life, and I don't claim to. I mean, I know the basic stuff, but I couldn't tell you about whale migrations or anything like that. I am the farthest thing from a marine biologist. My first thought was that it was a whale swimming underneath the boat. The boat got rocked pretty hard. I guessed at the time whatever went underneath us must have just bumped into us by accident. My friend comes out of the cabin, excited, telling his wife to come out here, that there's a whale close by. So my guess obviously wasn't that wrong. I trusted my friend because he knows what he's talking about when it comes to being out at sea. So I quickly ran to the starboard side to see what I thought was going to be a whale emerging to the surface in the distance. It wasn't. We didn't see anything other than a bunch of bubbles a little ways off. Right when John was about to say, "Get my binoculars," to his wife, this large serpent-like body rises out of the water, away from the ship, and goes back down again. When I say large, I'm talking large. Capital L, font size 72. There was no head that rose beyond the water, and no tail. It just looked to be part of the body. John and I were in total awe at the size of this serpent-like body that appeared out of the water. I'll tell you exactly what I remember. The under part of it was white, while the top part was a green-gray scale pattern. The weather outside was perfectly clear and sunny. We couldn't have asked for a better day or time to have a sighting like this. There was no mistaking what we were seeing. The body portion of whatever animal this belonged to was much longer than that of a whale, so I want to clear that up right now. The girth of this part of the body we witnessed was larger than that of a whale, to which some might be in disbelief, but when I say large, I do mean it. What I'm guessing happened is that whatever this was must have come underneath our boat, heading off into the west, and as it got further out, my assumption is that it probably dove downwards underwater, and as a result, part of its body curved and coiled above the surface before submerging again. If I'm not being clear enough, just imagine a colossal-sized sea serpent that we saw part of the body of. I'm going to try and give you an estimate of girth and potential length, but I can't be so sure. Because we were out at sea, I have no way to measure how far away or how far close we were to it. I'm going to go ahead and guess maybe 70 yards out. I will say it was close enough we got a look at it for a few seconds as it appeared out of the water and then submerged again. When you see something like that, it's hard not to be in total awe of the size of something like that living in the water. I know it was visibly larger all around in girth than that of a whale. You could just tell by the sight alone. I learned from John that blue whales are around 13 meters in girth, and this was maybe double that. Length could be very hard to judge. Bear with me, but it could have possibly been 60 feet minimum, very easily. With how large that part of the body that came out, and how serpent-like it was, it would make total sense for it to have a much more elongated body. It could have been more than 100 feet in length. We don't know. We didn't see. Whatever it was thought to have been large enough to rock the boat as hard as it did by just barely bumping into us from underneath. We were anchored at the time of this event, and it was roughly 2 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Because we were anchored, nothing really happened. We didn't drift off or anything like that. We would have, though, had we not been anchored, because of the sheer force of this bump. The large amount of bubbles we saw right before part of the body surfaced was an immense amount of air escaping to the surface. So it's possible that whatever this was, like a whale, isn't 100% aquatic in its bio makeup. I'm just throwing a bunch of speculation out here, based on what me and John saw. I spent some time talking all this over with John on the phone before sending this to you, and so a lot of the knowledge of whales, measurements, etc. and whatnot are mainly from him, because like I said, my knowledge is so minimal of sea life. John's wife never came out of the cabin at the time, and I think she was doing something for John, like getting his binoculars, so she didn't witness it. Only John and I did. I saw an unknown kind of fish, with tentacle-like tendrils protruding on its back, the size of a small person, covered in dark green and black scales, with a tapered face and bright yellow eyes. This was during my vacation to Japan I had years and years ago. I was with my friend Akira, who spoke fluent Japanese, sightseeing and going all around the country to see the beauty Japan held. We were visiting Lake Yamanaka. My Japanese friend was doing some photography work on different sightings throughout the area. Lake Yamanaka is gorgeous in every way. It is one of the 5 lakes around Mount Fuji, I'm told. I only know these things because my friend Akira had told me all this before taking me out sightseeing. Akira, who was doing photography at the time, was setting up her tripod. That's when close by us came this large fish, bigger than we could have both ever imagined. It came up right to the surface, just underneath the water. It was clear as day, and you could see nearly every detail of this fish as it nearly broke surface. It almost glided across the water effortlessly. It was so graceful. It was amazing. You could make out every distinction in the details I just explained. As it moved past us, you could see these long tendrils at the end of its tail that dragged behind it by 10 or more feet. Long, thick tendrils that looked very reminiscent of tentacles. I don't know if they moved or had any use or whatnot, but it was an incredible sight to witness. There were a bunch of other people on the path next to us watching this as it went on. This fish swam up near us and then veered off and kept going while staying right underneath the surface in full view. People were astonished, pointing their cameras and snapping pictures. I had never seen a fish like this in my life. My friend Akira, who, like I said, is Japanese and spoke it fluently, also spoke good English, and told me that everybody else was just as surprised as us. She did not recognize such a fish ever before. Sorry my story is so short, there isn't much more to it. I had tried to Google a fish in Japan or on lakes with a similar description, but I could not come up with much. Maybe there are just certain fish that belong to certain areas of the world. I'm surprised that I'm running this out, because I'm not the type of person to ever show interest in this subject, but I believe I saw some sort of aquatic sea creature that is either unknown to man or is part human in a sense. Before I go on, I'll give you some background information on me. I'm a professional photographer. I do lots of work for larger clients, and even have some of my work featured in magazines. For that record, I'm going to keep my identity concealed, because if my name gets out, attached to this, it might ruin me. I can't risk that. I've spent far too many years building up my repertoire, so you can call me Ethan for short. Now, the time and place this event took was in 2016. I was visiting the chain of islands of Hawaii, doing some landscape photography of the coast and surrounding spots for a client that was working on a big project. I was out in the early morning hours on the beach of the southwestern side of Oahu. I was setting up to do some landscape shots of the ocean, getting my tripod just right, when to my left, I felt this weird sensation, like someone was looking at me. So I turned out of reaction, and I was astonished at what I saw. Standing out of the shallow water was a creature I can't begin to accurately describe to you. It was a bluish green, had scales covering the entire body, fins, was rather shorter and kind of stubby looking. It was standing there, about waist deep in the shallow water, just watching me set up my tripod. As soon as I noticed it, I yelled out of shock. It swiftly turned back toward the water and disappeared underneath the surface. It almost did like a belly flop, nose dive kind of thing. It was so fast, I can't describe it. I have never seen a creature like this before in my life. It looked so human-like. I don't even have anything that comes to mind for me to give you a comparison, because there's nothing that looks like that. I didn't see its lower half, but it was very much so half man, half fish, or sea-like. It had a human-like face with black eyes. It didn't make any noise that I noticed. This thing was probably only about 20 feet away from me. I hadn't seen it because of the angle that I was facing setting up my equipment. Who knows how long it had been there, watching me. This happened during the early morning hours, just as the sun was rising, so I had a lot of visibility and clarity on what I saw. It was so smooth in its movements that after it disappeared back into the water, I tore down my equipment as fast as I could and changed locations for my shooting that day. The hardest part was creating an excuse as to why I couldn't shoot at that location, because my client wanted very specific pictures of that location that I was at. Luckily, I was able to create almost identical pictures at a different location without my client ever knowing. I was not going to go back to that spot at the beach. I don't know what was watching me, but it gave me the creeps. Had I known there's animals like that live in the water, I probably would have thought twice about going down to that spot on the beach. My work is ever going in my list of clients, and it doesn't stop. I have never had anything weird like that happen to me before, or since. With the 4th of July coming up, I have a very interesting tale for you that occurred about 4 or 5 years ago on the 4th of July. My father and I, and some other family and friends were boating out on a local lake. This is a rather large lake, and we were going around to the other side to find a better fishing spot. The time was about 1 p.m. in the afternoon. After we had found a good spot, we did some fishing. My dad booted up the motor again, and we went back to the original docking spot that we were at. Well, my dad noticed on the way back something. The rudder seemed to be acting weird. It wasn't fully functional like it was, and it was making a very odd smell, and sounded a bit weird. It would then have periods where it sounded functional again, or at least semi-functional. My father never thought much of it, but by the time we got to the end of the day and we were loading the boat back on the trailer out of the water, he saw the most horrific thing. Well, we all did. The reason the rudder had been making all of those funky noises as we were on the boat, because something had gotten caught in the blade, jamming it partially when pulling on the engine and having it go multiple times. The rudder must have chopped up whatever this was, because its body was still partially stuck on the rudder. I don't know what it was, and I've never seen a fish like this. It had gills, but was very amphibian reptilian looking. It had a long body, black eyes, and a large gaping mouth with lots of sharp teeth. It was longer than my father, so probably about 8 feet in length. It wasn't an alligator gar, trust me. I know what those look like. Those are fish, and they definitely look like fish. This looked much more not fish-like, as I said. Very amphibious and reptilian looking. From what I saw, it kind of reminded me of a cross between a frog thing and an alligator, if that makes sense, but with a more eel-like body. It's really hard to describe. It doesn't help that it was pretty mutilated by the rudder blades of the boat, so what we were seeing was its partial body. It had arms though, whatever it was, and it looked like they were clung onto the rudder. It's like it was clung onto the bottom of the boat, right as he started up the engine, would be my guess. It was so freaky. Freaked my dad out, because he's done so much fishing. He ain't ever seen anything like that. My whole family saw it. Tried to convince him it was a sturgeon, but please, sturgeon don't look anything like this did. It was dark green and had patches of black on it. Very bizarre. I didn't take a picture, but I wish I would have. The head was still intact, partially, but its face was torn off, at least half of it, from the blade. Whatever it was large. I forgot to mention more about its face. It had a very short, protruding mouth. Not quite a snout, but very reptile-like, I thought. Or that's the way it looked. The teeth were sharp, and in great numbers, but they too looked more reptile-like than fish. Fish teeth are sharp, but these resembled shark teeth, kind of. It's hard to explain. You would have to have seen it to know what I meant. It took my dad about an hour or two to try and fully pry this thing off of his rudder, so it was completely disengaged. The more chunks of meat he ripped off his rudder, the nastier it was. Very clumpy looking meat. I've had alligator meat before, and it kind of reminded me of that. It's just one of those things that you look back on as something unexplainable. So, this story happened last summer. We have lawn parties every year at my mom's house on the lake. This particular one got pretty crazy, and I ended up real tipsy. But when I drink, I get hyped up, and everything just seems like a good idea. We all kept jokingly saying, "Yeah, we're all gonna go swimming later." As the night drew on, I was warm from running all over the place, so I said, "Okay, time to swim." Everyone laughed, but I was set on it. I probably had the most to drink that night, so no one else could be convinced. I didn't care though. Something about alcohol just makes you feel fearless, even though I knew there were eels around the lake at night, which would usually terrify me sober. I got to the wharf and slowly slipped into the water, and it was a great night to swim. They threw me a life jacket, just to be on the safe side. I just sat on in and grabbed my drink. I floated around laughing while they all snapped pictures of me. After a few minutes of fun, all of it wore off and I was a little creeped out. So I got out and we went on with the rest of the night, having a great time. The next morning, we cooked a big breakfast and talked about how fun the night was and how crazy I was for going out into the water. So goes the routine of looking through all the pictures of the night before and uploading them onto social media. Everyone was spread out between the kitchen, dining room, and living room, but the house seemed oddly quiet for how many people were there, and they all started handling their phones to one another, pointing at something. So right away, I was thinking no way, they had some really embarrassing pictures of me. But nobody was laughing. I was confused. Then they handed me the phone and asked, "Do you see anything weird in this picture?" It didn't seem like anything at first, but then I saw it. It looked like figures of people standing around me while I floated there in the lake. I was kind of freaked out, but I thought it could just be fog. I'll look through the rest. I flipped to the next one and examined it. What I saw was in the picture. I zoomed in and looked for an excuse for it, but I can't explain it, and everybody else saw it too. It looked like a horned creature just emerging from the water right in front of me. I had the chills and am so creeped out just reliving this. I'll never swim in that lake again, especially at night.